Board of Education meeting, and the first item of business is the approval of the agenda.
Move we approve the agenda.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, and the second one is an executive session. So I have that motion. I'll go ahead and just read it. I move the Board of Education recess to executive session to protect the public interest in negotiating a fair and equitable contract to discuss negotiations pursuant to the exception for employer-employee negotiations under COMA with Dr. Anthony Lewis, Anna Stubblefield, Jerry Kimball, David Cunningham, Kathy Johnson, Sam Reed Devon, and Matt Brungart invited to be present, and with the board to return to open session in this room at 7 o'clock with possible action to follow.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Hey, we are back from executive session, and we don't have any action. So I would like to open our budget hearing with Kathy Johnson, Executive Director of Finance.
Good evening. Kathy Johnson, Executive Director of Finance, and really for the budget hearing, there isn't a presentation. It's just an opportunity for any further questions from you all or questions that, again, as a public hearing, to be able to have folks come up and do that. So it's really just an open time. Information has been shared, and it's just what you're looking at were just those total budgets, the mill levy, and later in the board meeting, that's the part that you'll be approving. So ongoing line item details within that are things that you can make decisions tonight, tomorrow, several board meetings in. Those are things that can continue to change. All you're doing tonight is the big umbrella numbers. So,
Do we have any questions for Kathy?
and I can reshare any additional information if you want me to.
Okay, and do we have any public questions for Director of Finance? Okay. So budget hearing is closed? Okay, great. So we will move to the report of the President of the Board of Education. I don't have a ton, but I have a couple things. So I wanted to just comment on a couple of fun events that we had. Last week we had our new teacher welcome, and then this morning we had our annual all-staff kickoff at the Lead Center. Both were really fantastic events, and I want to first thank the Lead Center for letting us have it in there. It was a fantastic space for it. I think it was a lot of fun. And also to thank Julie Boyle. I know there were a lot of people probably involved in the planning, but I got to be backstage and watch Julie just sort of be the master of ceremonies back there and make sure everything flowed really smoothly. And so thank you for all your work, Julie. I also very quickly wanted to mention, I think several of us certainly have heard a lot about the middle school cell phone policy and a lot of concerns about that policy, and maybe there might be some misinformation out there about what the policy really states. And so I just wanted to say, that kind of came to being based upon a lot of feedback from teachers in the buildings about how disruptive the cell phones were, looking at research about cell phone usage in middle schools across the nation, and there's a real movement to move away from letting kids have those phones during the classroom teaching time. And Kelly and Shannon, who are both on our policy committee, can speak to it more in board commentary if they'd like, but we did have a lot of concerns about whether or not it was going to create equity issues and things of that nature. And I think that the one I got several questions about, were their phones going to be sort of confiscated and then they wouldn't have access to them? So what if kids maybe have some written into their IEPs or 504s that they can listen to music? The phones will not be taken away. The kids will be able to have them on their person. And then anything, of course, within an IEP or 504 is going to be honored, because that's what we do in the schools all the time, is we work with the individual plans. And so those are the two things. Do you feel like, I know that you got a lot of feedback on it too. I don't know if you want to chime in while we're discussing it. Yeah, we did. There was some questions about whether or not discipline was going to be really strict with the cell phone policy, and certainly it's going to be the same as it will with any kid that's not following the rules in class. There will be warnings and whatnot. So, there might be hiccups, but certainly there will not be additional stringent disciplines in place because of the cell phone policy. So I really do think this is the right thing for our middle school kids, and it's an experiment we're going to try this year and see if it works out better. So hopefully that answers some questions for our community, and we can always, of course, be looking at that information as we move forward. So. And with that, I will say it's the time for the report of the superintendent.
Thank you. First Student employees, and for those of you that may not be familiar with First Student, they provide our transportation for our students. Those employees returned to work on last Wednesday, and Julie Boyle and myself, we were able to attend their staff luncheon. We enjoyed visiting with bus drivers, bus mechanics, and their office staff, and had an opportunity to speak to the bus drivers and just to continue to offer to them how crucial they are to our success as a district as well, because in many cases they are the first adult interaction for many of our scholars. So amazing opportunity and amazing time there. Great lunch as well there with the bus drivers this past Wednesday. And this past Saturday, we also had an opportunity to attend and participate in our community safety fair at the South Park. We had district staff there, Denise Johnson, offered bicycle safety courses. Dr. Jerry Kimball talked to parents about digital safety. We also had some common sense media website information to pass out to students about staying safe online. Julie Boyle also shared Alice training overview with the parents. Parents and students had an opportunity to take a selfie with the superintendent. So that was a hit, and I don't know. Our Lawrence School Foundation also collected school supplies to support the students from the Cram the Cruiser competition. And this was a competition that was hosted by the Douglas County Sheriff's Department, Lawrence Police Department, and the KU Police Department. A little friendly competition on how many school supplies can be crammed into each one of their police cruisers. So it was a really fun time. They also had a Dunk the Cop, game out there for the students and parents if they wanted to dunk a cop in a dunk booth. So that was really fun. And then today, of course, a huge, exciting day for our district. All of our staff returned today, and as Jessica mentioned, we met at the Lead Center. It was a super exciting time for us to kick off our 2018-19 school year. Thank you.
Okay. And so we will move to patron commentary. I do have two people who would like to speak today. Are there any more, Julie, that you've received? Okay. Okay. So we will start with Jocelyn Mathis. And I need you to come up to the microphone, and while you're coming up, I'll read our audience participation policy. So USD 497 Board of Education welcomes patron comments. Thanks you for taking the time to talk to us about policies and procedures, and we set this time aside during our meetings to hear from you. This is a time to share your opinions. However, complaints about specific staff or students will be heard by the board in executive session in order to protect the privacy of individuals to be discussed. While you're not required to share your contact information, we ask that you do, and you did, so thank you. Please limit your comments to 5 minutes or less. Thank you.
Thank you for having me. I came to this board meeting tonight. It's the first time I've ever been here, specifically because of Sunset Hills 5th grade class, which is, as I understand it, has 64 students in it. And my mother is a veteran of public school teaching. She has taught, well, she retired last year, 30 years. My son is going to be in 5th grade. He's been in classes with 30 students. My mother's taught classes with 30 students, and it's too many. It's just too many. I would really encourage the board to decide to add a 5th grade teacher for these kids. It is one of the easiest ways to improve performance for kids and morale for teachers, as I understand it, is to have a lower class size. And the times that my mother had 30 students in all of her classes or in many of her classes, I helped her. Great, because she could not do it because she sat up until midnight grading papers in 6th grade, 7th grade classes. So, I mean, we love our teachers at Sunset Hill. I have really enjoyed every one of them. And the 5th grade teachers deserve to be able to give all of their attention and time and concentration to our kids, and our kids deserve to have that extra time and concentration from their teachers. I feel really strongly about it, and I would appreciate it if you could find a 3rd, 5th grade teacher for these kids. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Melanie Schonenberg. Okay.
Thank you very much. I also have a 5th grader at Sunset Hill, a very anxious 5th grader who values smaller class sizes, I believe, because he, the added noise, the added bodies in a classroom, it just brings it kind of robs his focus. It's something that he struggles with anyway, but then to have a class size be 30 students is just overwhelming to him. I actually gotten to follow these kiddos from kindergarten on up. They are some amazing kiddos. They are very excited workers. They participate heartily in any activities that they are given, and even with the best of classroom management, which they have had, it is very challenging for their learning to take place and move forward in a large class situation. And so I would really like to see Sunset Hill be approved for a third fifth grade classroom, if that's at all possible, just to alleviate the stress on the part of the teachers, but then on part of the students as well, who struggle so much with that focus issue. Thank you.
Thank you. And our final speaker is Bonnie Greenlee.
Hi, my name is Bonnie Greenlee, and I have 3 children, and our oldest is starting kindergarten this year at Deerfield. And we are very excited, and when we got his class list, there were 3 classes of 25 or 26, and that means there are 25 or 26 4, 5, and 6-year-olds all going to be in one classroom, which is absolutely outrageous. And the students and our teachers absolutely deserve better than this. I've taught for 9 years, never in Lawrence, but 4 different districts, 4 different schools, 2 different states, overseas, and I never had a class that large in first, second, or third grade. I have been told that the number for kindergarten through third grade in order to get a 4th section or a new teacher is 26. And I was just wondering where that number came from. I never saw it in writing, but I've been told that. I couldn't find any research that stated that 26 is an appropriate number for kindergarten, first, second, or third graders. I've also been told that hiring, instead of hiring an extra teacher, hiring paras or aides for large classes is a possibility. Well, that would be better than nothing. I think that's a Band-Aid and not a solution. And couldn't we hire a few teachers with some of those salaries as well? I also have looked at the board policy manual. I had to dig a little bit. The instructional program, i.e. planning for instruction, and line 14 states that the elementary class size goals are no more than 17 and no fewer than 13 in grades kindergarten through third, and no more than 26 and no fewer than 18 in grades 4th through 6. Why do we have these goals if they're, I don't know what school they're being met in. So I would like a 4th section of kindergarten at Deerfield, plus whatever these ladies wanted to. And like I said before, our teachers and our students deserve better. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, this is Jennifer Thomas.
Hi, I didn't actually plan to speak tonight, but thank you for allowing me to say a few words. I just want to say thank you for everyone that came tonight and spoke about this issue. I have a 5th grader at Sunset Hill this year, and would very much appreciate it if you would consider granting Sunset Hill another 5th grade teacher. He definitely does way better with lower class sizes. He definitely needs the one-on-one interaction with his teacher. And there were 4 there were 3 fourth grade sections last year, and so he is used to this smaller class size. So that's all. I just wanted to say thank you to everyone who came and support what they've said. Thanks very much.
I will say that these are budget questions at the end of the day, and so when Kathy Johnson comes back up on our agenda, we will be talking a little bit about the budget, and I do believe we're going to get some information about what our options really are, so I would encourage you to stay if you can. So moving on to board commentary. GR.
So at the board retreat, one of the assignments that I was given was to do some research on board management software options to manage meeting agendas and board policy and different things. And so what I had done was I had went out and found 4 different options for us, 4 different companies. And so my plan had been to reach out to all 4 and talk to them and see what they had to offer and basically filter the list of 4 myself down to 2, which actually turned out to be pretty easy because only 2 of them responded to me. I didn't actually take it personal, but so I sat through 2 live demos from the 2 of them, and they're actually really interesting. And so I have really fancy folders for all of you of information that you can digest as you choose to. I'm sorry, at least it stops at Anthony. So one is called Board Docs and one is called Board Pack. And so the plan going forward is that I will, and talking to Jessica, that I will take the contact information that I have from the 2 companies and I will turn it over to Elise, and then she will work to schedule the 2 live demos that I saw in front of the board, and we'll go from there. And so what you have is the information that the 2 different companies sent me about what they offer. And so quick little Board Docs is a company that was basically, it was invented by a software developer whose wife was a school board member, and he every month she would get a packet in the mail by FedEx of all the board documents, and he thought that was the most inefficient thing he had ever seen. So he developed a software company to solve it. And then Board Pack is just basically around small meeting things. So they both have strengths and weaknesses. If you'd like my personal opinion on which one I like better, I'll give you after we see the demos, because I don't want to. But I certainly think one is better than the other, and I'll share it after we see the demos. But that's kind of where we are with that.
Thank you for doing this research for us. We really appreciate it. And I think that we are trying to get this hopefully maybe scheduled in our last August meeting. Yeah, so we'll have that to look forward to and maybe get something that can help us stay a little more organized, and it'll be good. Thank you, GR.
And for the one person to make it would also make the board policy manual a lot easier to find online.
Yeah. Shannon. Yeah.
So I just wanted to share a couple of things. At the end of July, I had the opportunity to attend the mental health first aid class that was put on here at the district for district staff, and thank you for making that available to board members. It was an excellent class, and it was a day-long commitment, which is a big chunk of time, but it's youth mental health first aid, and it was taught by 2 facilitators, one of whom was with Burt Nash and one who is with our district, and very powerful, I felt like it was very useful, and would highly encourage board members who have an interest, if you can make the time to attend. I felt like it was really worth the 8 hours of my day to go to that class. Learned a lot. It was very emotional. We had a facilities meeting on August 2nd, GR and I did, at the new Facilities and Operations facility out on 23rd and Haskell. Really, really great to see that facility up and running. I'm so excited for our F&O staff and everyone who works there to have that facility to support the work that they do. We went over, during that meeting, really went over an update on all of our ongoing bond projects for this summer, and where we stand with bond projects and with the athletic field turf projects, and got a good update on all of that. Everything's going to be ready. And, as I always say with these construction projects, there's always hiccups along the way, but our staff is doing a great job of managing those hiccups and making sure that our facilities are ready for our kids. August 6th, we had a policy meeting. Kelly and I had a policy meeting. We are continuing work on our gifts and donations policies, and I think we finally reached a place at that meeting where we laid all the different, we had several different policies that all related to each other and referred to each other, and we really got to take a comprehensive look at all of that together and work on some rewrites that I think are really going to be much more understandable and effective in terms of implementation. So I'm excited about where that's going. We'll have another draft of those policies that we'll review at our next meeting. Still work in progress on that. And then finally, I am now the board representative on the Public Incentive Review Committee. I took over from Jill, who has done a great job for the last 2 years, right? I think I think you've been on it for the last 2 years. So thank you for serving on that committee. And we had an item today. We talked about an industrial revenue bond request from Heritage Tractor. That is not something that will come to this board for approval. We only see the Neighborhood Revitalization Act requests, but just wanted to make everyone aware that that was happening. So thank you.
Yeah, Kelly.
I think I'm not supposed to touch that. Carol Cladu Blackwood is a social worker and friend and student in my department. And she recently let me know, or I got to hear, that the National Indian Education Association selected her for the 2008 NIEA Parent of the Year for her work on the Billy Mills project. So just really proud, and she's just delighted, and it's kind of a big deal, and so glad to hear about that. So if you haven't sent her a note, do, because she gets really excited when she gets notes. So, and then I just want to extend a thank you to the parents that came to talk to us about class sizes, and to think about both when we hear about the budgeting considerations. I started on the board in January, so I have this question in terms of process. If they don't stay until we talk about this issue because they have like a 5 and a 3-year-old at home, how would they be updated on the process related to how we make decisions about classroom sizes, how we, like what the comprehensive review, like we have to look at, Kennedy and other schools as well that maybe don't have folks here, or Langston Hughes or wherever it might be. So can you talk to me about process, maybe not the answers right now, but how they would hear back from
Yeah,
folks?
we certainly can share the process with the principals, and the principals can then in turn share that with the parents in terms of how the class size is, that the thresholds are generated.
Okay, great. Mm-hmm. So if your name was,
get an
if you're
update of
here,
what's
yeah, okay,
tonight.
And then you can share it maybe with your friends or whatever. Okay, great, thanks. Okay.
Anybody else? Okay. Then we are moving on to the consent agenda. So consent agenda items are those that are considered routine and are adopted by one motion unless any board member or the superintendent requests that an item be removed. The items removed are voted on separately. So do we have a motion?
I move we approve the consent agenda.
Second.
Johnson,
Yes.
Fincher,
Yes.
Gordon Ross,
Yes.
Ingram, Jones,
Yes.
Kimball,
Yes.
Beeson.
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0.
Okay, and that brings us to our old business, which is bringing Kathy Johnson, Executive Director of Finance, back up to talk about budget approval.
Take just a second. It looks like it wasn't turned on at the beginning.
Serene picture, the budget numbers up there.
Excuse me, umbrellas.
that do? That turn everything off?
They made it
Shut
really
it down.
quiet in here.
Apologize here.
Dr. Lewis will sing us a solo. Sing us a solo.
I know our tech guys are monitoring us. Where are you? Come out.
So what's on the other side?
Load, I apologize. I thought it was already on.
Okay.
So, as it's coming up, as I mentioned, what you're looking at and what you're doing as part of the budget approval is really just the state board document of the Code 99, and I can bring that up so that you can see that. And that is really just the maximum budget authorities for each fund and the mill levy that goes along with each of those funds. And so I will bring that up real quickly, and you can remind you what that looks like. The board agenda is included. So what you're looking at is this form here, and this is the form that has those maximum budget authorities. The maximum budget authorities and maximum mill levy. And as a result of what's being published, we actually have a decrease in our mill levy. The decrease in the mill levy is about a 1.3 decrease in our mill levy. And so that is a good thing. And then our budget totals. So what's in there is what we've published. The line item details of that continues to just kind of evolve as we finish hiring contracts, as we finish negotiations, which is still pending. All of those things that we've talked about at the last multiple board meetings where we've talked about what we've approved and what has been changed, restructure, all those kinds of things. That's been incorporated into these big totals. I can bring that list back up if you would like me to, that we've talked about in the past, but I don't know that we need to. So your motion tonight is really just approving this form as it's outlined in our board enclosure. What I wanted to mention just briefly as before you do your final approval, there's a couple of things I wanted to clarify. One, I think the confusion of when they say the deficit spending in the $1.4 million, just to clarify that that's not rebuilding or putting money into reserve. That money, you are taking new revenue and directing it to expenditures that are already out there and happening. So we have, during the block grant, when we didn't have new revenues, we were exceeding our revenues with expenditures, ongoing expenditures, which is what has created the deficit spending. And as we've talked about, it's at about $2.9 million. So the 1.4 that you're redirecting of revenues is to expenditures we've been spending the last couple of years, and it's only half of what we're overspending that we need to deal with. And so it's not new money, it's not going into a reserve, it's not going into a savings, it's actually directing so that we don't continue to deplete anything that's out there as savings. And what we have left is going to cover the other half that you have not addressed this year. And so there really isn't this rebuilding of reserves. We are trying to stop the bleeding a little bit, or pay off our debt, I guess, if you wanted to direct it that way as your credit card. That being said, we know there's negotiations pending, and we're constantly monitoring where our class sizes are going to be as we look at coming into the fall. Are they going to be in their seats? What do those look like? There's staffing thresholds, and Samri's here to be able to talk a little bit further about those thresholds and where we are with some of our buildings. We know that there are specifically two schools that have well exceeded that threshold. And those two schools of Sunset and Broken Arrow, their kids beyond that threshold, in that we are looking currently in how we can redesign a Title II federal grant that is got a needs assessment attached to it. So revising that needs assessment to be able to include some staffing component with some of those funds. We have some carryover dollars there. So we're hoping that if we can get that resolved, we will be able to cover at least 2 teachers out of that Title II federal grant, which will help direct those 2 most over right now of threshold with Sunset Hill and Broken Arrow. We know there's several other schools that have just barely eked to the threshold, some that are not quite there, but we would love to be able to address if we can figure out how to do that within where we are. And I think Samry is here to be able to talk about that. Or
new to share. Like you said, again, you know, our enrollment adjusts daily. So we are looking at that, and we're updating Dr. Lewis every couple hours on enrollment through the enrollment center and such. But like Kathy was stating, we do have 2 that exceeds the threshold. We're looking at, you know, there's several others that are almost there, not quite there, 2, 3, 4 students away. But we do know of 2 right now, the kindergarten at Broken Arrow and the 5th grade at Sunset.
So you feel fairly confident that we will be able to fill those 2 positions at this point?
With teachers.
With, with your Title II fund redistribution?
yes,
With money.
yes.
Okay.
I talked to Ellen Willits, who works with that grant.
Teachers, yes.
We do. We think we can work that out and figure out how to make that work, so we're not supplanting. We're doing all the right things that we can do within that grant. We do need to revise the needs assessment with it, and we'll do that right away.
Okay, and so then that information will be sent out to the principals at Sunset and Broken Arrow to share with their communities?
The fact that these 2 teachers will be.
Yes, and we did anticipate some of this, so along with the principal at Sunset and a few other hotspots, you know, Brian McCafferty, we interviewed last week, and so we have several good candidates already.
Okay.
So.
And so the remaining hotspots that you're still evaluating, it's just kind of a wait-and-see game as far as if they get over the threshold?
We have new enrollees, and we have kids that aren't coming. We have to wait to see what kids are showing up in some seats to get more of an accurate count.
Okay.
We understand.
Makes sense?
So,
Yeah.
Okay.
since we're having a conversation about this, it might be helpful to revisit a few things about how we've made some decisions about this over time. So, for example, the board policy that was referenced in the public comments, being a goal that was adopted by the board, and I think that was even adopted as policy before I joined the board, so that's been in place for a very long time. But then we have class thresholds that are where we say, okay, this is when we split a class, and those thresholds vary based on the number of free and reduced lunch students that we have at different schools. I don't know, David, if you want to speak to that.
That's a good summary, and honestly, several years ago, when we were experiencing some budget difficulties, those thresholds were adjusted to address. I mean, you just didn't have enough money to hire all the teachers that you would like to hire, and so those thresholds have modified. And so, again, it comes down to the resources to hire the teachers that you need. The policy that was referenced was first approved in 2001 and the last amended in 2007. And so it has stated the board goals in the context of what would be ideal for class sizes. I've been here since '07, and we've never, with the exception of our small elementary schools, where we do have sometimes 13, 14 kids in a classroom, we're not meeting those goals in our 3 and 4 section schools. We're able to meet it in our 1 and 2 section. Well, they don't have any 1 section schools anymore. New York was a 1 section school years ago. It's now 2 sections. So in that context, you sometimes are able to meet those goals, but in the larger schools, we can't do it.
And so the other thing that that we've done over the years, it used to be the case that we had a larger pool of what we would consider to be contingency teachers, and with budget cuts, the board had decided over the years that we would reduce that pool, which is, if I'm explaining it or thinking about it right, means that we don't have as many positions built into the budget to address these class size situations as we did 4 or 5 or 6 years ago.
Have reduced the overall number of contingent positions that were used to address the hotspots for those budget reasons. And then you elected to use some of that contingency to provide some counseling resources at the elementary level this year, which also then further reduced the contingency that might address these hotspots.
In other words, we use the contingency to hire full-time guidance counselors at the schools that didn't have them.
And those are needed resources. Those are going to provide some really good services in areas where they're needed. So that was not a criticism of the board in terms of that decision. But in order to manage the budget that you have, you took the contingencies and put them over there. So we ran out of contingency before we ran out of hotspots.
So one of the other things that I remember that we've done in the past around this issue for decision-making by the board has been, it used to be the case that if we had enrollment at a school where, say, you thought you were going to be just over the threshold and you were going to have 3 sections, but the kids didn't show up, it used to be that we would leave the 3 sections there. But was it during the block grants that we said, no, if you don't have the enrollment show up for the 3rd section, we're actually going to take that teacher and put them in a building where we have a need for that.
We've done that.
And have we done that?
We haven't done that this year.
Is that still a possibility that we would do that?
We're watching one situation where they're right on the borderline. They're 1 over, but they were 1 over before the other schools went 1, 2, 3, or 4 over, whatever they are now. So we've been watching that to see whether all of those grade levels or those students show up. If they don't, that principal's already been advised that we will be taking that person to apply them to an area where they have a hotspot.
Okay. Thank you.
And just to clarify, if we have to go beyond either moving a teacher or these 2 federal grants, we will either have to come back to you all with a discussion, or we will have to figure out internally ways to carve out something that we can do if we're going to actually address the hotspot with either a teacher or a para.
In other words, where we're not going to spend the money on something else in order to do that because the money's been allocated.
Correct. We'll have to figure out how to reallocate. So we will continue to bring those items to you as they evolve and keep you in the loop, and we're trying to address them internally as best we can, as quickly as we can. So trying to work together to make that happen.
So I just had this clarifying question about that again, and it was something that you had said. I just wanted to ask, make sure that I understood. So you had talked about waiting until students were in the room to see who showed up and then making decisions. So if I'm understanding that correctly, that could mean that, are you talking about the first day of school, then you would make a decision? Or are you, like, at what point would you say, I mean, how long would students be, like, you've met your teacher and now you're going to move to this class, you know what I mean?
I didn't mean the students,
Yeah.
I meant like the enrollment number.
The enrollment numbers.
The actual number of students.
Okay.
Because sometimes they don't let us know that they're not coming.
Okay.
And then they, it's been a couple of days and, if several kids don't show up. So I was looking more at the enrollment, the number of students.
The number of students. Okay. I thought that's what you meant. And then I was thinking, like, are we moving? No, it was obviously my and then I have this question that was asked in the public comment that I just want to understand better and I think would be helpful for everyone. Where do the thresholds come from? Can someone talk to that really specifically?
Thresholds, it's an evolution in terms of years ago we would basically use ratios, student-teacher ratios, and develop our staffing. We then had a second layer of thresholds. They were a little bit lower so that you could better manage how many kids were in a classroom. We went into a period of time where our revenues were decreasing, and then we went into block grants. And because of that, there wasn't the capacity to hire enough teachers, and so the thresholds were raised to increase the class size, which thus means you have fewer teachers. So budget was driving some of those threshold numbers. Not that people don't understand the essence of this board policy, i.e. in terms of what are maybe better or ideal types of classroom sizes, but there are some limitations in terms of the resources. And so during the block grant period and in the year or two preceding that, some of those numbers were being adjusted to accommodate the fact that we had some declining revenues.
So basically, our policy doesn't set the thresholds. The thresholds are gap, basically.
Well, actually, you could say it that way, but the thresholds aren't in gap.
They're not, okay.
They're just an administratively generated number, and we try to anticipate understanding what the revenues are going to be. And we haven't changed the thresholds for a couple of years now.
I seem to recall at some point when before this board, so I know Vanessa was still on the board, I'm pretty sure that you all brought the thresholds to the board and we discussed them, and I don't know if I can't remember if we voted to approve them, but it was that time period where we were breaking out the tiers. It's been quite a few years ago.
I don't recall if it was an approval item or just an informational item.
Okay.
It's been enough time has lapsed, I don't recall whether it was an approval or not, but certainly would have been brought in the context of what Kathy talks about in the budgeting as well as staffing.
And that's where I was going to go, is that it's been a budget discussion, because as you talk about those thresholds and what you want at K2 and 3, 4, 5, that drives budget, what you're going to spend, because each one of those average costs to the district is close to $60,000 for a staff certified teacher. So when you look at FICA and Medicare, unemployment, their fringe, the whole cost of that staff person. And so as you're looking at what that cost is to the district and how you're going to spend your dollars, that's what somewhat drives also those thresholds. And so you're reallocating dollars to smaller class sizes in the lower grades, then what does that look like across the board, not just in your elementary schools, but in your middle schools and in your high schools. And so it has an impact in your resources. And so it is a budget discussion and where those have come. And so we have talked about, if we want to lower the class size, or the ratio by 1, what does that look budgetarily and how much money is that? And can you do it? Can you not do it? And where do you want to do it or target those resources? And so it is a budget discussion as far as kind of where you end up with those. Knowing the goal is really maybe what we would just love to be able to do ideally. Yeah. And then how do you do that with 14 elementary schools and with varying sizes of enrollment, and then your middle school and your high school, and spreading those resources across all of those buildings. And it's challenging, and it's we know that that's the biggest resource we could possibly give our kids. So how do we make that work for us? And that's a challenge that we struggle through every time we work through the budget. And so it's on our radar, and I'm sure it'll be on yours as we continue to look forward and see where we want to go with that.
And so just to clarify, since it's not what's in the policy, we have class size numbers that K through 2, right, and then 3 through 5 have. So K through 2 is slightly smaller than the 3 through 5, and there's
third, then fourth.
so there's 3 different tiers, and there's also the lowest number of SES kids. And then so do we have 2 different tiers of schools, basically based on the SES numbers?
Three
tiers.
Levels, 3 tiers, because K2, 3, and 4, 5.
Right, but then we have
We also stratify by SES. So your higher SES schools are going to have lower thresholds.
Right.
Than some of your.
And so there's 2 tiers of that based on free and reduced lunch.
3.
Oh no, everybody in the back is saying there's
still
3.
within
Okay.
third grade.
3.
It might be helpful just to provide those tiers to board members again as a reminder. I've seen them multiple times over the years. I don't know that everybody has seen them recently.
And when you talked about this year's, whatever year that was, are these, is it policy or is it goals?
It's not in board policy.
It's just a goal. I mean, it's just
the policy that was referenced in the public comment. It's a board policy, but it's framed in terms of these are the goals for class size. They are not the thresholds that we use for crafting the budget to decide how many teachers. They're guidelines, yeah. Aspirational goals, right? That unless the state were to provide a whole lot more funding. I mean, we had that conversation not too long ago about what would it take to lower the thresholds by 1 in kindergarten across the district, and it was upwards of $200,000, I think. Was that that number? We talked about it early on in the budget discussion.
Yeah. And it's a difficult thing across Kansas. I teach in Kansas City, Kansas, and we have 4 sections with, I'm currently have 26 kids enrolled in ours, and, we come from a high free reduced lunch ESL population, and unfortunately, if I'm being transparent, sometimes, looking at it on this side, sometimes putting a Band-Aid on it is the best we can do at that time and with support staff, but it sounds like we're going to at least have potentially a high possibility of having 2 teachers, so that's fantastic. But, we talked about this a lot, and I was, if I'm being transparent, like heartbroken, because I'm like, oh, that number. I taught kindergarten with 23, 24 kids, and teaching second grade for the first time in a long time with 26 kids, and, it's probably, it's not ideal, but, we are teachers, we are resilient, and hopefully that won't, we want the best case scenario, and I believe everyone sitting here, ideally would love to have more teachers in there, and I mean, I have a kid on the spectrum, ADHD, I understand those, concerns, and just know that I believe that the staff is really working hard and trying to do the best that we can at the end of the day, even if it's not what we really hoped for, so.
Well, thank you for that additional
Thank you.
explanation.
Thank you. A motion for you to approve this, so I can officially file it.
Have it pulled up.
I do. I move the Board of Education approve the 2018-2019 budget and mill levy for USD 497 as noted on the State of Kansas Budget Form Code 99.
Fincher?
Yes.
Gordon Ross?
Yes.
Ingram? Jones?
Yes.
Kimball?
Yes.
Beeson?
Yes.
Johnson?
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0.
Okay, up next we have a report on early childhood and Tiny K with Kevin Harrell and Lori Basham. That's right.
Okay, good evening. I am Laura Basham, Director of Early Childhood, and I am here tonight for the purpose of providing an update on Tiny K. Just a reminder that we did bring Tiny K into our district over the summer, and there were a couple things that as we were working into the transition in the spring that we just weren't quite sure about, and so what we wanted to do is just update you with a couple of the things that were pending, and then give you a real brief overview of some of the things that we're looking forward to this school year. So just a brief reminder, looking at this information, we do have 4 parts now that make up our early childhood services. Our early childhood services do run from birth to kindergarten age eligible now. Looking at the left-hand side here, Tiny K at the top left, that is the new program that we're looking at tonight, birth to 3 services. And then the other 3 components of early childhood that were in existence prior to the summer were parents as teachers, and then on that middle column, our 4-year-old at risk program, and then also special education services for our 3 to 5-year-olds. So right now we've got, this is our comprehensive program for early childhood. So a couple of the things that we weren't quite sure how that was going to shake out with our restructuring or with the incoming Tiny K program. We do have a director of early childhood for early childhood now, which is me. We also have 2 coordinators. The coordinator for our Birth to 3 program, Susie Green, that is a part-time existing program. She was Parents as Teachers coordinator half-time, and what we did is the funds that came in through Tiny K with a half-time coordinator, we put those 2 coordinator positions together, and now we have Susie as the coordinator for our Birth to 3 programming. So that was a little bit of the restructuring. That coordinator on the right-hand side, Marie Taylor, that was an existing structure already, that was already in place, and Marie works to help us with our comprehensive early childhood programming as well as our special education program and our 4-year-old at risk. Unfortunately, Susie and Marie were not able to be here tonight, otherwise I would be recognizing them. Susie actually very diligently is out doing home visits this evening with our transition and with some of the moving. She just really wanted to prioritize our families. So she's in homes this evening in lieu of being here. Just a brief overview. So July 2nd was our day. We officially brought Tiny K into Lawrence Public Schools. Tiny K is Part C of our Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. That does provide specialized instruction or special education to families for students that are birth to 3 years old. And these are students that qualify with having a delay and or a disability. Comprehensive services, they're pretty comprehensive, the services that we do offer, and they are offered at no cost to parents, and they do support the individualized needs of the students. And these students, what's a little different about Tiny K, these students or these services are provided in the child's own environment. So they're provided where a child lives, where they work, or not work, where they live, where they learn, and where they play. Most of the time in parents' homes and or in the community. Looking at our positions for Tiny K, we have 3 speech pathologist positions for the program. One of them right now, unfortunately, is vacant. So if anyone does know a certified speech and language pathologist, we're looking for someone that's qualified and that wants to serve students birth to 3. We also have 2 early childhood special education teachers, 1 occupational therapist, 1 physical therapist. We have that half-time coordinator that I talked about earlier, Susie Green, and then 1 administrative assistant that really helps us with compliance and state reporting and making sure that we're sticking to timelines with all of the paperwork that's involved with the special education program. New to Tiny K. So we've got, as of July 2nd, we've got 8 people that are hired. They all have devices. That was a big woohoo for the people that we did hire. They were very excited. And then they have completed all of our beginning of the year training, also something very new to the Tiny K staff. Tiny K before wasn't their own entity, and so they were excited, pleased, very surprised at all of the PD offerings that they've been involved in coming into Lawrence Public Schools as new staff, so that was exciting to see that through their eyes. And they are right now actively providing services to our families and our children, and they've been doing that since July. One of the things we're working on right now, we are in the process of moving. So they are packing, they're getting things ready, and right now they are at Centennial, and we are moving to the East Heights building. There's a new revitalized early childhood wing that we're excited about. Once we get settled, we will be sending out invitations for you guys to come and visit. Very excited about our wing. And then also the website for Tiny K is now living underneath Lawrence Public Schools URL. Some of the things that we're looking at, just kind of exploring throughout this year, because as we're transitioning in, we do have a lot of learning to do as well. Looking at how this year-round system, year-round services, how it fits into our current structures. We're looking at information, examining information that we've had over the summer, and then trying to make some decisions as we move forward. Also looking at the comprehensive early childhood program. So it's a new piece to our puzzle. And so working to make sure that this piece is really fitting in well and building the relationships between our staff, and then also how do we capitalize that and build those relationships with families and students just to help things make sure that they're seamless in transitions. With Tiny K does bring new state regulations, program assurances that myself as a director, our coordinators, we're on a learning curve. We're making sure that we're staying up to speed and really learning to make sure that we're keeping abreast of all of the new things that we need to make sure to do to stay in compliance. And part of the Kansas in-service training system kits, we do have a state consultant that is working with us on a regular basis. Right now we have meetings scheduled with her monthly and more often if we need to. And she's really working to make sure that we've got our process down, procedures down, and our practices for that birth to 3 program. Some of the things we're looking forward to, mentioned before, we're really looking forward to offering those seamless services for families from birth to 3. And in that transition from 3 or Tiny K services into our 3 to 5 programming. We're also looking forward to blending our services for families. Some of the exciting things, just in that short time that Tiny K has officially become part of us, there's been conversation about how we're using the existing Parents as Teachers playroom. And so those times where we don't have play groups and it's not in use, how can Tiny K capitalize and use some of those resources that we already have? It's developmentally appropriate for our birth to 3-year-olds. So how are we incorporating that space we already have into some of those services? So lots of exciting collaboration and opportunities we're looking at. And that goes with maximizing our resources, and then also the collaboration and the professional development. It really, just in the short time that we've had our Tiny K staff on board, and then also just these couple days that we've had our existing early childhood staff, the opportunities and just become much more rich with our professional development, because we do have a different lens from birth to 3, and it really helps us with our vertical programming. And so we're not just starting with our vision at 3 years old, but we've got somebody at that birth to 3 carrying that lens and really asking questions and keeping us connected. So that's really exciting. We're looking forward to that as we move forward through the year. We also do look forward to just bringing you back some of our lessons learned for this year, some of the strengths, some of our challenges, and then also our successes. So that's our brief update. Are there any questions?
Thank you very much. I appreciate the update. And I had one question, but went back to the first slide and realized that you have answered it, which was just how many are we serving? And so that's helpful information as well. So thank you.
And that number does flux throughout the year, just depending on families and needs.
And do you feel like this has been a fairly smooth transition overall for the district to absorb Tiny K?
I think overall it's been fairly smooth. Any transition, there are little hiccups, but overall I think we're in a good spot and we're continuing to work through.
And did we stay within the budget that we had discussed?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
We did.
Okay. Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, up next is a technology update with Ellen Willits and Christine Wondra. And it looks like Jerry Kimball.
I need somebody to show me how to use a Mac.
While they are getting set up, I will introduce everyone. I'm Jerry Kimball, Assistant Superintendent of Leading Learning and Technology. You remember last year I took on the Leading and Learning. That's why you're seeing some new faces here with technology. I have Ellen Willits with me, who is the Director of Learning and Technology, Kirsten Wendra, the Assistant Director of Learning and Technology. And then I also have David Vigneri, which I want to explain who David is, because I don't know if you've all met him or seen him or wonder why he's here. So last year we had a resignation of Jennifer Fessenden, who was leading our technology department. When she left, it was a time of year when it's hard to find someone to step in. And so at the time, we knew we needed someone because we had a lot of projects going. We were upgrading the Wi-Fi in the middle schools. We knew we would have the roll-in, the roll-out of technology, and we had some networking things going on. We also knew that this is a time where technology has really changed in Lawrence Public Schools in the last 3 years. No longer are we sending students to a computer lab. Now we have students with one-to-one devices. So how should our structure and our department look differently? So this seemed like a really good opportunity to hire in a consultant that could go out in the district, find out how things were going, speak to people candidly, and find out what our needs were, and come back with some suggestions of how we could move forward in a positive manner. And so David Vigneri was hired. The board will be happy to know that he did not spend more than what was left in Jennifer's budget. So we stayed within that. And he has done a lot of research out in the schools and has talked to people and made some really good suggestions. So he will be speaking tonight as well. And then we also have with us Brad Kemp from principal at West Middle School. So I'm going to turn it over now to Ellen Willits, and she will start the report for tonight.
Good evening. What we would like to do this evening is just sort of bring you up to date on the state of technology in Lawrence Public Schools. We actually are going to talk about 5 broad areas this evening, and this evening we'll start with the one-to-one devices.
Good evening. Because you have approved for us to lease a number of our devices, it allows us to have the most up-to-date or mostly up-to-date technology and devices for our students and staff. So starting in April, we were able to replace 4-year-old teacher, 800 of them, teacher MacBooks, and 1,400 student and teacher iPads. As with all things, last year saw the end of our one-to-one first year of our high school MacBooks. So we thought it would be an ideal time to get some feedback from our students at the high school and see how their one-to-one year worked. And we did this in a way that allowed every student who had a device at the high school to be able to participate in the survey. So through our mobile device management, we were able to put a pop-up on every student's device, assuming that it was there that week at school and they were using it. The device popped up and said, hey, please take a survey. Now, we did talk with principals and made sure to confirm with teachers and staff that it wasn't spam or malware or anything like that so that students could participate in it. We also had a little giveaway of Beats headphones for each campus. There was going to be one winner if they chose to give us their information. That was at the end of the survey. They could opt into that or not at all. So I'm not exactly sure what the discrepancy is as to why LHS participated more than Free State, but there are the responses that we received. Also, it was a nice smattering of our 9th, 10th, and 11th graders. We were not able to survey our seniors as they had already turned in their devices since they're about a week before that. So that's the only reason that they're absent from the survey. So it was nice. What we wanted to find out was basically, did it enhance their learning throughout the school year? And if it positively or negatively did so, and truly across the board, all 103 said that yes, it either neutrally or positively impacted their learning. So that was great to see, and you'll have some comments from the students in there.
With that survey, was it just those 3 questions, or was it more than that?
It was more.
Would it be possible to get the entire survey and the raw data?
Yep, yes. I would be happy to give that to you. Just don't be alarmed that it comes. There's a couple questions about our filtering and things that they want open, so I don't want to shock you.
I have 5 kids.
Exactly. Okay. So just I will get that to you.
And my filter.
Fair warning. The other thing that we asked is obviously if there was any challenges, and we wanted to know how to best meet their needs. And truly, again, by far and large, there wasn't really a lot of challenge. Just remembering to charge it, that it can kind of create a distraction. There were some issues that they felt like securely was too locked down, those kinds of things. But I thought that it was pretty rad, was kind of a nice comment. So overall, it was, I feel like from the students' perspective, a success.
We do have some challenges with our return of some of our property, and so I'm going to spend a little bit of time here sharing with you some of the information that I have in regard to the end of the year lost property. This is a chart just for middle school. The second chart that I will share with you obviously is for the high schools. We have about 2,500 iPads in our middle schools. We lost 26 of them. There are 42 of them that are still listed in Destiny as being checked out to the students. So I'm not really considering those lost. I do believe that the students still have them. They probably needed them over the summer, and the schools just allowed them to keep it. But there's a chance that some of those could be lost. So just 26, I can say, are definitely have not been returned. So the replacement costs at $355 a piece. That's where I'm getting my range. The $9,200 and the $9,230 would be the cost for the 26 devices, and the larger amount would be for the 68 if all of them are not returned. I don't expect that. I really do believe that the majority of those students have their devices. The current fee structure that we have billed out to parents is the $40 for the lost device. That's the anticipated amount if all 26 at the low end or all 68 at the high end were to pay their fees. The subtotal on the far left in yellow then is the district's cost, the difference between what you would have received, what we would have received in fees and the replacement costs. One of the things I'm going to show you in a minute is the lost devices at the high school. When we began the one-to-one process with Apple, they told us that we could expect about a 5% loss in devices. Lawrence Public Schools has about a 2% loss in our devices. So I have 26 out of 2,500, so we really did not lose a lot of devices. Our losses are occurring primarily in our chargers. And I don't know about you, I don't have any children, but I have a husband, and we have a tendency to run through those. I don't know, they're kind of like readers. We really just can't keep track of them very well at my house. So, but not to say, we do have a greater loss in the cords, and of the 2,500 cords that were out there, I reordered about 1,200 of them to replace them back out. They cost $27 a piece, so it's about $32,000 to replace those.
Can I ask a quick question? So I remember the replacement cost number being lower. Am I the only one that remembers? I feel like it was like $9 or something the last time we saw this for a replacement charger for the iPad. And that the replacement charger for the MacBook was more like $80.
Yeah. I don't know. I didn't.
I feel like
I'd have to go back and look. This is what, when I purchased them this year, this was the cost. So let me check back though with IT and see whether there was.
And maybe it was the brick and the cord because.
Right.
Maybe.
Yeah, there are 3 parts that make
Okay.
that all up.
Okay.
But let me get at the exact pieces and parts.
And while I'm already interrupting you, I have another question, which is, so these 42 or even the 26? I assume the 26 are like, they were destroyed? to some
Just
capacity?
lost would be, I'd have to go and look at everyone individually. Not returned is how I'm going to probably quantify those as not returned, and the individuals in the building knew they weren't returned.
Okay, and we don't have any kind of way to locate these
We do.
iPads?
For devices that are not returned and considered stolen, and we can ping them online and find out where they are. We're also able then to, they call it brick it, which pretty much just means she doesn't run it off for you, so we can turn it off. I did have some devices that were stolen this past year, and we did retrieve all of those.
Okay, so these 42 that you think you know where they are, is that why you think you know where they are?
Yeah, they're still checked out in student names.
And
At
you've
the end of the
pinged
year,
them and they're at those addresses and?
yeah, those students are still active in the system. The library media specialists are the ones who run that at the end for me, and they lost those, or they marked those 26 as lost. Again, it would not all be at the end. During the year, it's possible that a student could have lost a device or had one that, yeah, right? Okay. So at the end of the year, those are the ones that are marked as lost by the library media specialist. The other 42 are still checked out to a student in the system. Implies to me, and I guess we could probably ask Brad, implies to me that probably there's some reason those kids have got them. Summer school.
For those 42, when was the last time somebody pinged them?
May.
And is there a reason why you haven't tried to ping them since May?
Only because I guess I feel pretty comfortable that the librarians didn't check them as lost and they knew where they were. I haven't had a chance to visit with them on it, though.
So reasons you would allow a student to keep it would be?
Well, and hold on.
We are also in the process of moving from JAMP, which is our mobile device management, over to Mosul. So our service with JAMP has basically stopped to be able to recover those as of our switch over in July. And we are holding to renew enroll the middle school returning student devices so that they aren't wiped.
So we're doing these things so we can figure out where these devices are and get them back. Okay.
So can I ask a question about the fee? I just want to clarify the fee amount where it says $40 and $5. That's the amount that we are charging parents. And is that, there's not like a sliding, for example, my family might be able to pay to the district. We just decided 40 flat regardless of your income level, for example. And then you can clarify that in a minute, but before we move on to that, I just have this other question. When you presented the information, actually, I can come back to that one. Go ahead, Anna.
I was just going to share, because this conversation happened before you joined the board in January, but we had this conversation about setting the fee amount as in the policy committee last fall, or last year before we adopted our fees for this past school year. And that was the recommendation that was reached by the policy committee. Lot of conversation that was had around issues of equity and the notion that we arrived at this recommendation based on the notion that we're requiring students to have these devices as a learning tool, and therefore we shouldn't either punish students who can't afford to replace them, nor should we be discouraging those families from having their students bring those devices home for fear that they would get lost or damaged. And that was really the after a lot of discussion in the policy committee, that was the rationale that drove the recommendation. But we did have a discussion about we were going to have to look at this data to know whether that was going to be reasonable.
Okay.
Because we knew that there would be some number of devices that we would be paying to replace. I think that the power cords far exceed the expectation that we had in that discussion when we were setting the fees in terms of the number that were not returned. That is disappointing that we had that many that weren't returned based on the discussions that we had.
Yeah.
But that, I just wanted to clarify.
I know, I feel, you feel like the new kid making people rehash stuff that you'd already figured out, so I apologize for sidetracking the
Absolutely
presentation. Yeah, actually, that will do. Thanks.
Okay, good. The last chart down there talks about Khajiits, and Khajiits are the wireless access points that we send home to families who may not have internet access at home. There were 199 of those at middle schools, 35 of those were lost. The replacement cost at $130 is up there, and they were a $10 fee charge as well. So you'll see your subtotal in there.
Actually, I'm sorry, before you move on, I do have to ask this question. About I'm interested in this process that the librarians made a decision maybe based on equity or something along those lines, that they would leave the iPad out with a student that maybe had a learning need over the summer, or there's some, and it's interesting to me that there's not a way for them to communicate that to you so that we understand it's intentionally checked out and the parent knows that it's intentionally checked out and that it's checked out for an educational purpose that would be ongoing over the summer. So is there a way to capture that data, or is that something you guys are considering for next year?
We are.
Okay.
We'll have some future conversation on that.
Okay, great.
Yep, you bet. Okay, so this is now frozen. Start again. Thank you. Good thing I have all the tech people up here and 2 of them back there. We're good to go. I can do it all. Okay. This is our high school information. As I said, we have about a 2% loss. Of the 3,400 MacBooks that were out in the building, 77 of those were not returned, and they were marked as lost. What I can tell you is that there were devices that were kept out at the high schools for honors and debate and some of their summer school. That I knew what they were. The middle school one was a little not as clean for me to know, so that's why I'm also thinking that they were there. But there were some that did keep them well. Their replacement cost with a case is about $738, which reflects out to that $56,826. MacBooks fees are $75, and that would be your potential for recoverable fee money, giving you the difference of about the $51,000. Power adapters were a little better there, same kind of thing, 3 pieces. 650 of those of the 3,400 were lost. They're about $58, and honestly, it is one piece of that is $50. It is the actual power charger, and so it's that one piece doesn't come back. It's a price. Those are $10, and the district's total cost that's remaining there is about $31.2. Again, they had 12 of their 149 Khajiits that were missing. The replacement cost at the 130 and those 10. The bottom chart, what I'm giving you there is the total district cost for Khajiits, power adapters, and devices. I divided them out so that you could see them in all 3 of the categories, just to kind of get a little bit of a feel where your costs are at on that. I am going to speak just quickly to some options that we have, because you did sort of bring that up on what are we thinking about doing. We are going to look at a tighter process for the end of the year. Again, we had a process, but now that we're there, we have a little bit of a better understanding of what that might look like. I think it's also important to consider, did we give students adequate time to return? We tell them, don't bring your power charger to school, leave it at home. So we need to think about how much time we've given them to, oh, I forgot it today, but I can bring it tomorrow. So we just need to look at some of what that might possibly look like. How well did we communicate to parents? Were parents aware that I had your device, but I don't have your charger, or conversely, or you're missing one little part of it, or whatever? And then we want to think about developing perhaps a handbook that will help students and families know what it is to take care of that, and how important it is that you keep all 3 parts and that you're careful with it. And so just what does it look like to have reasonable and good care of our equipment? So I think maybe we could have done some communication on that as well, too. As we began to look at these losses...
We have a question. I'm sorry, I didn't want to interrupt. One of the things I was wondering about the power cords in particular, at least I know from my middle schooler, it comes home unmarked.
Yes.
So is part of the consideration somehow marking that part of the devices so that families know, okay, this is the one that needs to go back to school, or my kid has destroyed the one that needs to go back to school.
Exactly. This year we are asking that the tag number on the device be written on a little white piece of tag that's on the other. Do understand that every year we roll a fourth of those or a third of those back out. So to permanently mark that with that tag, we'd have to associate that with it. So that's a little bit more cumbersome, but we are making the effort to put them on, just like we did with teacher devices that she shared we had replenished.
Okay.
That's at least a way to keep track of it. But you're right, it's the same color as everybody else's that's out there, and most definitely.
Okay.
So
Thank you.
you bet.
Any other questions? Okay.
Could you maybe try and find a Lawrence Public School logo branded mattress tag sticker that you could wrap around and stick on there?
Possibly. Yeah, we need to look at that. I will tell you that as we began to talk to districts to the east and west of us and say, so, like, what are y'all doing for yours? They all have some sort of a plan for their devices. It's the cords that are really the bigger issues, and they are all struggling as we are. It's just almost gotten to be a consumable, but a pretty pricey consumable even at that point, but they are all in the same boat. So we're not necessarily out there on a ledge. We're probably a little far over this year, but we can work with that as well. As we begin to look at what they were doing in regard to some of that, these were about the three things that came out. Lawrence Public Schools is in the middle. We do a student fee. $40 if you don't return it, $10 if you don't return it. So we're in the middle. We're going to spend some time kind of looking at this and potentially come back to the policy committee with some options that they might want to consider.
Sorry, I have a quick question.
Go ahead.
So if they return it and it's raggedy, they don't get charged a fee?
This point in time this year, when they were
Guarantee.
returned, when they were raggedy, they just turned them in. So yeah, the end of the year process in regard to the cords was really not good. And so we have developed something different that a couple of the people up on the floor upstairs have some really good ideas. Honest to goodness, Brad's building did the best. They actually put the device and the charger inside just a large gallon bag. So that if my charger is all chewed up or it's all marked up, then next year Kirsten won't get it because it's coming back to me with my device in my bag. And we need to do that as well because we had some that you wouldn't have wanted to go back to anybody. So, yeah, and there were some that, that we just hadn't taken care of. So, yeah, we can do some things differently this year to be able to help that as well. I want to mention just real quickly about Apple Care. We do have Apple Care. Which does work as far as a warranty to those devices, but the broken screens or the smashed keys, that's a repair. We do have a company that helps us with that, so we do take care of some of those things on other ways. I had a slide for questions, but maybe we're good.
I do have a family that said their laptop was stolen, and the mother said she got a $999 bill. Who can I refer to talk about it?
Me. Okay. On a stolen device, if they report it and do a police report, there shouldn't be a charge. So let me just follow up on what happened. You bet. No, there should not have been. Yeah. Thank you.
On the previous slide for the possible solutions, can you talk a little bit about the insurance?
Sure. Basically, the self-insure and the insurance company are the same thing. The district determines a fee or a premium that every family would pay. You can charge every family the same amount. Some of them do. Some of them have sliding scale. Like Kirsten has several children. Maybe she would only pay $40, or I'd pay maybe $20, but she's not going to pay $80 or something. Free and reduced or frequently waived. So it basically establishes a pool of money that then if you self-insure, Kathy and her friends would keep it and manage it and then set it aside, so these costs then would come out of that. The insurance company does basically the same thing. You lose a little bit in theirs, but they actually facilitate the actual collection of the money and then give it back to the district, and then we would do the same thing, be able to purchase out of that. Some of them do sliding fees even on the student. It might be the first time it's the small charge, the second time it's 50% of the replacement, and the third time more. It varied. There's lots of options, so we can just kind of lay some of them out for everybody to look at.
Thank you.
I have a question about the survey. So I noticed, I'm guessing that you surveyed the high schoolers because it was the first year using the devices, but you didn't survey the middle schoolers again about the iPad.
To be completely honest, it came again as our positions were changing. Hey, that would be a really great idea to survey students. By the time it was the last week of May, and the middle school students had already returned their devices.
Okay.
So we didn't actually have any way for them to complete it.
It's interesting. Okay, so is it possible? What is the timeline for the decision about? I remember at one of our meetings there was a conversation about this when we renew the iPad decision or something. Am I making this up? I felt like it was when we were getting our orientation. GR and I were getting our orientation.
She's asking that the middle school iPad lease is coming up for renewal, I think, at the end of this school year.
So that's the question. Yeah, so when is that coming up? 2 years.
One more before that lease is up.
Okay, so that data would be really helpful, right? And then it was interesting to me that teachers were not surveyed. I know you said, you just said, Kelly, I just came up with this. Yeah, you know, I mean, I heard that, but I was wondering for next year if that's a conversation.
Sure. I know at the district office we've worked to try, there's a lot of teacher surveys,
a
lot of different things.
Yeah.
And that's just trying to be sensitive to that, especially at the end of the year. But I think if we plan forward and that's data that we need, then absolutely.
I hear that. There's so much cost associated with this that when we're making decisions as a board, I mean, I don't want to say like we only want to ask them questions associated with those things that cost us. I don't want to do that. That's a ridiculous bar. But it does seem like it's such an investment and it has such an impact on how they teach in the classroom, et cetera, that it would be interesting to compare the data from the student to the teacher to understand if there is at least, this might be because I spend too much time doing research myself, but thinking about like, could we compare these two numbers and see what it might reveal?
Sure. And I will send all of you the survey results, and if there's any questions you think would be particularly provocative, compared teacher, student, let me know.
Well, I want make sure if it's useful.
Absolutely.
Don't do it. I don't want to ask you like, oh, this would be interesting. Why don't you spend your time collecting this? So no, but yeah, I appreciate it. Thank you. Sure.
So one last question. Where are we in terms of what you kind of anticipated these costs were going to be versus where they sort of landed? I mean, certainly you anticipated we were going to have some loss. So how far are we off?
That's really difficult to ask since Kirsten and I weren't in this department when it actually rolled out. So
but
I don't
Jerry
know
was.
that Jerry.
Yep. So I think the actual device, we're right where we thought we would be. It's the cords that have really flabbergasted us as to how many are missing and how many we've had to replace. But the devices themselves, we feel like we're on target there, but it's those cords.
Okay.
And it sounds like you guys have come up with some ideas that would make next year better. And
okay, thank you.
Part of what David discovered when he was out visiting with buildings, we're trying to enhance some of our practices in the department, trying to be more proactive in regard to our short-term and long-term planning. Instead of being hey, we need kind of purchaser, we're going to think long range, be more fiscally aware of where we are. One of the things we will begin looking at is an asset manager. I also work with the textbooks, and we have a lot of value in those as well as these devices. We have band uniforms, we have band equipment. We need a way to be able to track how old things are, how often they've been repaired, where are they at, all sorts of information. So we have a couple of companies who we will sit down and get some information on them and then see what that purchase might look like as well. In our conversation last May, several of the principals approached us in regard to continuous use of these one-to-one devices with students over the summer. For this evening, I've asked Brad to come and speak a little bit about some of the things that were happening at his building, so I'll let him take the floor.
So it kind of goes back to the question about who has the iPads over the summer and who's authorized to take one. So I can only speak for West. I know I have 2 student iPads still out. One student was still finishing up some LVS work. He was actually getting ahead so he could take geometry in his 8th grade year. So he's almost using virtual school as kind of like a grade skipping or an acceleration piece. So that's one family. Then I had another family that asked for a device because their student was brushing up, almost the opposite. didn't really get the Algebra 1 concept, so they're going to use Khan Academy to help them reinforce some of those ideas. So I know that 2 of those are from West, but that's kind of the things that come up for the summer learning. About this time of year, I think as a principal, I worry about that summer slump. You know, what do we have to make up with kids? So technology over the summer can be very beneficial. What I'm finding is a lot of kids now, especially at the middle school level, and I know Mr. Graber can probably talk to the high school a little bit, we are having more and more kids finding their own learning opportunities in the summer in order to better themselves, be more prepared for school, or maybe looking ahead to get ahead. So they're looking in Khan Academy, they're looking into virtual school, doing those type of schooling routes and getting credit for classes to move further. So I would like every kid to have that access to their iPad during the summer. When I put on an equity lens and look at this, I look at the students that are having these opportunities already, are mainly a lot of our white and Asian students that use this type of pathway to get farther ahead. So you start looking at that gap, just the opportunity for students to take on some of the summer stuff would be great. Really fight that summer slump a little bit to carry on education through the summer. So I always felt that learning should be a constant, but the time should be the variable. Right now, we're still stuck in that Rockefeller time frame where we're going to school 8 to 3:05, and we're going to go from August to May. That's a lot of time restraints for what the kids are experiencing today in a technology-rich environment. Kids today can take online college classes. Doesn't matter how old you are. They're free. Go to Coursera.com is a great company that allow you to audit a class from almost every major university, from Stanford to Minnesota to back up at the Penn. So I think it's a very fundamental shift of where we need to go. We talk a lot about the 21st classroom being this integration of like the old way and the new way. A lot of the research that talk about 21st century learning is 20 years old now. And here we are kind of in between. One thing I did find out when I knew I was going to come and talk to you, the board tonight, was looking at what other school districts have kind of experienced with summer one-to-one initiatives. There's not a lot of research out there about if it's beneficial, if it's not. It's almost, is the calculated risk enough to take to see if 1 or 2 or all your students will perform better the next year. But one thing that I found interesting comes from the Greater Clark County School District, which is in Indiana across the river from my hometown of Louisville, Kentucky. They found that when they give students full access to their one-to-one device over the summer, that they actually take better care of the device because they feel they have ownership. So we look at a lot of these losses, stealing and missing cords and things going back and forth. Right now, that is still considered a school device, which the district does pay for. But the more we can allow students to have ownership of that device, the more they'll use it for learning, is kind of what their school district found out. They also used one of their caveats of using their one-to-one summer device was enrollment in the next school year. So it's an inner city school. They wanted their families to enroll. You get the device if you enroll for the next school year type of thing. So there's some caveats for the students, but really it is that the equity piece of allowing all our students that opportunity that some of our other students do receive just being the family they were born in, which is kind of the issue for me. But that's why our devices are out. So if you all have any more questions, I can ask.
I do, and I don't know if it's for which one of you in the group, but just a couple of questions on what I remember our discussion being last year in advance of handing out the iPads in the high school. I just remember a couple things. One, that the kids were going to have their device, and it was their device each year. And I guess I wanted to see if that's still happening. I also understood, and I know my student came back and said, this is our computer and we get to keep it, and at the end of 4 years, we could even buy it if we want. Is that still a thing? Did I make that up? I mean,
The first piece I can answer.
And then the third thing is that I was under the impression, and I've had other families express to me that, maybe through our discussions, under the impression that the students were going to bring their laptops home during the summer and we discussed for a couple of reasons. In our discussion before we adopted this, we talked about bringing the internet and computer accessibility to all homes. I've actually heard from families saying, I thought we were going to be able to use it in the summer and help apply for jobs in the summer, do ACT, online study, at the library using other people's internet, but having a tool to use this. And I guess I walked away with maybe remembering the facts a little bit differently than what actually happened. So I was really surprised that that the students were not bringing their computers home in the summer. And I was, I guess maybe just, can you address that?
I know for my level, the iPads do stay with the student. So like Ms. Willis was saying, we put them in baggies, they get their cords, they turn it in, that's the same bag, same cords you get the next year. So that piece, yes, that it does follow them through the years at middle school, high school, and at high school.
So they will get the same device back, okay. Why didn't we have them bring the laptops home during the summer? Because I guess
I second that. I was also under that impression. So both of my kids received, I had a 6th grader last year, so that would have been the first year for the iPad, and then it was obviously the first year for the MacBook. So I also was under the impression they were going to keep those devices
over the summer.
Yep. So I don't know where the misfire was, but I also, when they were like, oh, we have to turn them in, I was surprised.
Mm-hmm.
Right. We hadn't had that full-blown discussion about them taking it home over the summer. We have talked about it in our executive leadership team, and we feel like there are several things that we need to look into about liability and that kind of thing. We've also gone ahead and researched what it'll cost for Khajiits, because right now we just have it for a 9-month contract, so we'll have to extend that to a 12-month contract. But this is something that we would like to research this year. The principals came to us in late spring and said, boy, we would really like to send them home, and technology department was not prepared to do that at that short notice, and so we would like to take this year to do all of the research. And
what are you doing with them?
They're just stored, and so we would...
They're just sitting in the bags or whatever. They're not receiving updates or anything like that?
So yes, they do. They
could be receiving those updates wherever, right?
Right.
Oh, okay.
They could, yes.
So you're not actually touching any of the devices?
We do. They do go through all of them, wipe them off, clean them up.
Okay.
And do that. But
I'm sorry.
Right.
Can I ask? So I have a related question. I'm just wondering, like when I'm hearing you say we're going to try to figure out what we're going to spend this year studying, how we would check them out over the summer. Is it possible that we could have a goal that most assuredly, at least students who communicate to the district in one way or another that they don't have a laptop at home, like by all means, keep my daughter's. She has a computer at home. But for kids that don't have that, and speak to Jill's question about wanting to study for ACTs, and speak to your question about equity issues, so when you're saying we're studying it, is that like we're studying it and we're going to have a plan to allow kids to take them?
We will have a plan. And conversely, we also need to have a plan for families that say we don't want this device at home.
Yeah.
So we need to get that worked out as well.
So come the end of the year, you'll have something in place that will allow.
Have it in February.
Yeah. Okay. Awesome.
Okay.
Thank you. Oh, is it on the?
It's on the slide. But so the other question then I have is, will we have a projection of what we expect to lose, so that this time next year you can actually identify what you are anticipating our loss will be versus what it actually is?
So we're having all kinds of conversations, and one of them is that you own the cord. it's just yours, and talk about maybe having those different scales of replacement, like the first time what it would cost, second time what it would cost, third time, and then also having a sliding scale. So we're going to bring all of those ideas to the policy committee to talk about how we could shore this up.
Okay, great.
That's what we would
And I'll,
like to do. The insurance would be part of that as well, so we will bring several ideas.
Mm-hmm. And I'll read the things in bold when you do.
No.
I'm going to add just really quick. One of the very first things that we are going to do, though, is survey the students to be sure they have an interest in taking it home. So just in case.
And we've also, I'm sorry.
Yes.
We've also talked, too, about
Okay.
when the students take the devices home, because I'm a strong proponent of them taking it home, learning can take place definitely indeed over the summer, but capturing data in terms of academic data relative to where were the students at the end of the year and when they come back, you know, how much gains, because we know there's a summer loss there, but the opportunities are endless for our students when they take those devices home. And so we've actually had that conversation at our ELT meeting, and we are, like I said, we will have a plan to the board in February and what that will look like.
We would also like teachers to weigh in and select some software that is maybe gamified that students could get on and work through. Maybe they have a math area they need to work on, or English language arts, and have some things ready for them where we can see exactly how much they're doing. But we do also have our principal from Free State High School, Myron Graber, that would like to speak to you just a little bit about why they would like to see the devices coming home over the summer. Thank you.
Thank you, and thanks for the opportunity. I ditto what Brad had to say. He took my speech, actually. But it is all about continuous learning is really what it's about, and that's why I was one of the principals that came forward and said, why do we need to bring the devices back in? Because it is about continuous learning, and as we look how education is changing for the future and the opportunities are there, that's what it's all about, really. And for us, it's also an equity issue. I look at that as a huge equity issue for students who don't have access during the summertime and those who have the ways and means to have access. The other thing is I have a little bit of experience because we were handing out computers tonight. That's what we were doing, and we've done this 2 nights now in the return effort, and we try to make sure that everybody got their. Well, everybody is getting the computer that they turned into us. It takes time. We've given out about 900 computers. It's taken us about 6.5 hours to do that. So the amount of time that it takes. Turning them in at the high school level is also a challenge because many of our teachers wanted the students to have their computers through the finals. As soon as that last final is over, you know what happens. High school kids are out the door. And so we're standing there, you know, frisking them and grabbing computers. It wasn't quite that bad, but the idea of returning them is a huge challenge. But it really comes down to the learning. That's the most important part that need. And I, too, looked for some research like Brad did. Topeka 501, they allow their students to keep their devices over the summer. We talked to some Shawnee Mission schools. Shawnee Mission has done it a couple of different ways. What we did hear from Shawnee Mission, though, is what was similar to said there. They had less tech problems when the students kept the computers over the summer because the updates were continual. They didn't have the login issues and the different things. Aspects like that, and I know we've already had some login issues just in the ones we've given out because students were coming back to us tonight from the first time because they were having the login issues. I don't know how many that'll be, and I don't know how great it'll be, but they did talk about the technology issues as when the computer set idle all summer, they lose their charge and they lose some things like that. So, thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you. Thank you.
Project.
Not tonight.
Okay.
Yours is Sorry.
So, you know,
Yeah, you can
Yeah.
buy out the lease.
Dr. Lewis has tasked us with checking that out.
Yes, the team is researching that. Of course, there are some things we need to be aware about relative to government purchasing and and things like that. But we did have that discussion at our last ELT meeting, and I even asked some students, how would they feel about that, and they just kind of lit up about the possibilities. But we feel that if that is indeed the case, whether they can purchase it or whatever, that will too allow students an opportunity to take care of the devices, because this is mine. And so that's something we definitely are exploring.
It's relevant to equity issues. My kid will get a laptop no matter what, but I think there are a lot of kids who might not have that opportunity when they go on, and so to the extent that it's theirs, they can take care of them, and they'll have that. I think that's a terrific idea if there's a way to work it out.
We'll explore. Okay, so end user supports, it's very important. As David went about and visited with the various principals and buildings, a couple of the things that came to the very forefront were wanting additional ongoing PD for all of the new that technology tends to be, and then getting more IT support in general. Building techs, obviously on the budget sheet, 2 building techs were requested, and we're in the process of still trying to farm out our support as best we can with that. We've tried to do as many of the enhancements as we can up to this year. One of the key things that we're looking at is just making sure that our building technicians are as aware of the school cycle and the building principals, vice versa, kind of that communication gap, making sure that when the testing cycles are coming around, that the appropriate updates are on the laptops and iPads and all of those kinds of things. So we're going to develop a committee. It'll be small, but just to kind of look at that building tech handbook and making sure that we're all on the same page, and so that buildings know what kind of support they're going to receive, and the techs can meet that support because it's been articulated. Another key thing that we've got going on, I mentioned the mobile device management. We'll talk about that in a little bit, but increasing our tech department hours. I think you've heard and seen feedback that everybody always wants to get to the help desk, and inevitably at times it will roll to voicemail. We can't clone Boone, but we are expanding the tech department hours to 4:45 Monday through Thursday, and then 4:30 on Friday, hoping to kind of bridge some of those needs at the beginning and end of school time.
Good evening. Before I start, I just want to say I came in March, and I've been welcomed really well, and gotten to visit with all the administrators, sat in each one of their offices, and got plenty of time, face time and seat time with them, and teachers, and just it's been a joy just to have that opportunity to do that, and so you have a great district. So when I came in March, one of the tasks that I was tasked was to basically, what Jerry says, take a look under the hood of the infrastructure side, the servers and the wires and cables and switches and those things. I started by doing a technology audit, and based off that technology audit, I assessed the hardware and the software that runs the hardware. I assessed the support that we do on that hardware. I also assess the cost that it takes to keep that hardware up to date and support it correctly. One of the questions I always ask anytime that I do anything in education is, when we make a decision to do something, how is it going to affect us in the classroom? How is it going to either enhance or change our learning? If we can't come back with a positive answer on that, then we're either doing something wrong or we need to evaluate it in another way. So that was my basis that I did as I went through. Lawrence Public Schools, as I collected all that data, the infrastructure today, it's healthy, it's running, but there are some things that concern me that I brought back to the team and shared with Dr. Lewis already, and I would like to just discuss those a little bit. The first one there is the local versus cloud storage, data backup plan, disaster recovery plan. I'm going to clump those together because they really kind of work off of each other. Today, we have a disaster recovery plan. We have a data backup plan. but it's local, okay? Local means that Free State is our primary storage or our primary servers, okay, that run the district. They process and they collect all of our data. At this district office, we have a co-location, a location that's just identical to the one at Free State, okay? It sits dormant to some extent, but it collects and it backs up, okay? So in an event that Free State had an issue, we could turn this up and we could carry on our business, okay? So it works well, and it's been tested and those types of things. And there are some things that we have to manually do to make that work today, which automation is perfect in a disaster recovery world. So what I'm recommending on this is I'm looking at a plan today, developing a plan. We've been working for about the last 2.5 months on this, looking at reducing a data center and moving that data center, which would be not the primary one, to the cloud, okay, or to an off-site scenario, okay? So we are backing up that data to that location. The reason I'm looking at that is because in an event right now, if we had a tornado that comes straight across and knocked out both buildings, we would lose our infrastructure, we would lose our data, okay? If we have our secure site, it's off-site, we can have true business continuity where we could carry on the day-to-day business, may not have school, but we could have our day-to-day business go on based off of that, okay? So I'm putting some measures in place. I'm developing that plan. I'll be coming back with a plan to you guys on that to just kind of give you some more in-depth stuff on the dollars and those types of things. Obviously, reducing the data center, that was going to need to be replaced anyway. That's going to reduce that cost because it is cheaper to go to the cloud than it is to be there. So I'm considering those options too, and Dr. Lewis and I have visited on that also. So that's one area. Another area that I want to deal with or talk about is our phone system. Okay, we got phones, we got bell systems, we got intercom systems, internal communication. Today, we have a phone system that ranges anywhere from 2 to 15 years old, depending on the hardware piece that you pick up in certain locations. Okay, the infrastructure side of that is the oldest. Okay, and so we're due. I mean, it's a 5 to 6 year process, and we're way beyond that in a lot of areas. So we're due to take an assessment of that and look at replacement or an upgrade of that. So I'm doing a cost analysis on that. And again, looking at it, replacing like for like versus replacing, a lot of you guys have it at home now, the IP phone system, the voice over IP goes over your internet. They call that hosted systems. I'm looking at those, weighing the cost, weighing the benefits and not benefits on both, and I'm going to be coming back and again delivering that to you guys at some point here for more discussion. Okay. Wireless access points and switch replacements at the elementary, both of those are 5 years old in our process here. And the wireless, 5 years old, is pretty antiquated in technology as far as when you connect a new device to that access point. That was the first time we placed access points in this district was 5 years ago, and it came with a 5 years worth of licensing. Okay, that's needs to be renewed this spring. Okay, we were fully aware of that. So developing that plan of what that looks like. My suggestion is not just to renew the license, but to upgrade the hardware at the same time. And I'm investigating the cost of those types of things, and we'll be bringing that again back to you also, okay? The reason we want to do the switches and the wireless is, the wireless I told you for the connectivity, switches are the same thing, okay? At the elementary schools right now, we've already replaced the high school and the middle school switches, and they're all up to grade and all that. At the elementary school, when I came in, one of the common themes that I heard was the seat time that we have with kids and the amount of time it takes for those kids to get online, okay? If you have a class of 26 or 28 and you have one teacher in there and they're trying to log on and they're all trying to do it at the same time, it could take anywhere from 10 to 30 minutes, you know? And so what we're trying to do is make the technology work better for the students, give them a better experience in the classroom, give the teachers an opportunity to have more learning that goes on in the classroom instead of troubleshooting. So those two areas are an area that we'll be moving forward and coming up with a plan. The security cameras, we received a grant this summer, a security grant, and with that, we're taking an opportunity to look at the security cameras that we currently have. Some of those, again, we've purchased 4, 5, 6 years ago, and some of them, you know, we get a picture, but we can't really identify the student or the teacher or whatever is going on in that hallway. So we're assessing getting the number of those. We're going to come back and we're going to develop a plan on how to replace those cameras, upgrade the software, make it to where the administrators have an opportunity to put pieces of the puzzle together a lot more effectively. And that's going to be within that grant. So that's an encouragement there. The last thing I want to just touch on real quick is the technology policies and procedures. We've obviously talked about a lot of policies tonight and those types of things. We have the technology policies in place, but I'm a firm believer that if we don't continue to evaluate those, especially in the technology world, just 3 years ago we were talking about computer labs, okay? We've got to make sure our policies are up to standard, okay? I'm working with multiple school districts, and I will be evaluating the processes and the procedures and the policies on that. We'll be bringing it to the team, you know, so we can discuss those. And I'll have some suggestions, but I'm sure everybody else will too. But anyway, it's just something that we need to continue to evaluate. So that's what I have tonight. I'd open up if you have any questions or comments. Everything I talk about, you don't see in the classroom. You see in the walls and other rooms. So
They strike me as big budget items
they can't
in terms of infrastructure.
And that's why I'm doing my due diligence as far as taking my time on this.
Okay.
And that's why I'm doing this versus this, because there's some benefits to one. It might cost more, but we can decide if that's a benefit we want to pay for, or we can look at another scenario that allows us to do certain things, but it's cheaper.
Okay.
Moving off-site obviously is a major cheaper rate to do that. And so instead of putting 2 new data centers in, we put 1 data center, you know, and those types of things. So the budgets are coming, the numbers. It's just taken us some time because I've told a lot of vendors coming in, and I've told them over and over, you know, I don't want to pay for anything we don't need, and I want to make it to where we move with our technology. Because as we look at the 3 to 5 year, you know, plan that we're going to develop here, I want to be able to say, yes, we can accommodate you because we've taken these steps. You know, this is not building an infrastructure for this school year or next school year. I want to build it so in 5 years we're still healthy, and we can modify it instead of replace it. Okay. Anything else?
As someone that's on the policy committee, so that I'm doing my homework up front, the timeline for coming to us with recommendations. So when were you?
Policies?
Yeah. When were you thinking about doing that?
I haven't addressed that. It was just a week ago or so that I visited with David about, you know, starting that up, and I have collected a bunch of policies. But other than that, I haven't gotten to that.
No problem. Thanks.
I would hope that we have that by Christmas time, though.
Okay.
Yeah. Anything else?
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
I'm really looking forward to the input on the policies. I think that's an area over time we've talked about a lot, but sometimes not being someone with a tech background, it will be really nice to have some input to help us really have that conversation. So thanks.
Okay, we're in the home stretch. Current and upcoming projects. I mentioned it before, but you in your July 2nd board meeting approved both the purchase of ClassLink and Mosul Manager. Just to give you an idea, the primary focus of both of those in 2 different fashions is basically to garner back instructional time for our students primarily. go.usd497.org is what we branded ClassLink as, but basically it's a single sign-on user platform. So the big deal, as you know, with technology is everywhere you go, you have to sign in, and you have to sign in with a login, and you have to sign in with the password, and then it spins a little bit, and then you get going. So depending on how much rich instructional use the teachers are making of technology, they can have students sending them to 4 or 5 different things in a tiny class period, and students are needing to get that time back. Go does that for us. So it's an opportunity basically to create a dashboard for student, staff. Eventually we'll have parents and guardians access to. And it basically looks like an iPad screen. So all of their instructional materials are little tiles across the top. And we will make sure that those are rostered on the district side so that, again, the students just click on it. Once they've set it up once, it's just a one click and they're in. So that's a really great feature. It also has the availability of file access. So if you've saved it in Dropbox or Google Drive or the T Drive or any of those things, it actually can search through all of those and give you your results without you having to go through your file bank of, I don't even remember where I put my project, or so on and so forth. So lots of functionality, but the basics are started. Teachers logged in to get to Power School this last week, so we're kind of up and running with baby steps, and we'll continue to import our user groups as we have more of that to come on. So that's Go. The other is Mosel Manager, and that's our mobile device management solution. So you heard about our switchover, and I will say if there is one gift that we had, it's that we didn't send student devices home over the summer because all of them had to be hand-touched and enrolled in our mobile device management. So we went away from JAMF and into Mosel. And some of them, as you heard from Myron, are still in the process of getting enrolled. For our middle schools, it actually wipes the iPads. So we are letting students get their device back, the one that they had, an opportunity to save their things, and then they'll be enrolled in Mosel. So that's kind of our process. Any of our new teachers that came into the district this year, all of their devices are enrolled in Mosel, and then the rest are kind of in the process of moving forward with our building tech. So if you hear about that, that's kind of the one foot in both camps that we're living in, but by next summer we should be good to go and we can push out all kinds of things and it will be lovely. Mosel's been incredibly customer service oriented. We had a tech that we were sitting with the CEO and said, gosh, it would be great if we had this button here, and 2 hours later it was there. So we've had tickets in with JAMP for 6 months plus, so we're very excited about this switch. The other big thing that we're implementing this school year is the full G Suite for Education. So I'm sure you've heard of teachers using Google Classroom. They use the Drive pretty robustly. The big shift for this will probably just be the email change. And we would move from Outlook email over to Gmail. So this is a migration. There isn't big data loss. We can move things over, but it is an opportunity for us to, again, get in front of teachers and make sure that they understand the switch, what it looks like. So we'll have a committee for the timeline communication and making sure that we've got plenty of professional development ahead of time so that everyone feels pretty comfortable with the change. We haven't set a real rigid timeline at this point until that committee gets formed and we kind of gauge as to what we need to do and back map from there. Last slide. Any questions? Oh, yes, the one other thing with Google. We are not kicking out the Microsoft Office suite. So especially the business office folks and things here at the ESDC do a lot with Excel and those kinds of features. We're not kicking it out. People can still have access to those. It's just primarily the email switch and the calendar is kind of going to be the big shift. Most of our classrooms use some form of Google now, and we'll still have those licenses. Okay. This will also help with our storage and our functionality in the classroom, because right now if you try and save an attachment out of Outlook, it doesn't directly save into your drive. You have to do it. So there's just a lot of redundancy that we're hoping to eliminate by this switch too.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks.
Okay, well, do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved. Second.
Oh.